In this video, you're going to learn 5 small habits that you need to incorporate into your worship ministry this coming year. Coming up. Hey there, Spencer Cormany here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you want to find those tips, head over to Instagram or Facebook at Leading Worship Well, where I'm posting new worship leading tips every single day. But you're here on YouTube, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below, and let's get into it, because today we're still talking about the new year. There's still time to focus on this coming year. I know we're like a week and a half in, but you can still set some things in place that are going to help you excel in your worship leading in this coming year. And this video is all about 5 habits that you should be incorporating. And habits are things that you do ultimately without thinking about them. But first, we need to identify them and then think about them and make the commitment to doing them over and over and over and over again until they become a habit. So I've identified 5 small habits. These are things that they're not really hard to do. You just need to, first of all, be aware of them, and second of all, make that commitment like I talked about to doing them. And then by the time you get to the end of the year, if you can have these 5 things in place, your worship leading and your worship ministry and your worship team environment and culture is going to be so above where it is right now, because that's how beneficial the small things, the small habits that you can develop are. So let's get into them. The first habit is this: start and end every worship gathering that you have with prayer. Whether it's your worship team rehearsals, or you're just getting together with your worship team outside of church, or it's a Sunday morning, are you honestly starting and ending every time with prayer? Because as worship leaders, we believe in the power of prayer, right? I mean, I hope you believe in the power of prayer, but I also know that it's so easy in the list of to-dos that we forget to pray. I mean, whenever your team shows up a little bit late and you're rushing to get things done because your service starts in an hour or 45 minutes and you got some songs to run through and you're trying to get them done, usually prayer is the first thing that goes, because the other stuff seems like it's more beneficial for you at the time. But what I've learned over the years is that if we just make the commitment to prayer, all of the other things will fall into place, because God wants us to pray. So he's not going to allow us to spend 5 minutes in prayer or however long it takes and then for us to be unprepared the rest of the time. He's going to bless that prayer, and that time of prayer is going to be more beneficial than those extra 5 minutes that you could have used to run through a song that you probably should have had prepared in the first place. So first of all, be prepared in the first place so you always have time for prayer, but also make the commitment to start your gatherings with prayer, your worship gatherings or your worship rehearsals. That's something that should be in your worship band rehearsals. You can check it out right here. I did a whole video on how to run a worship rehearsal, and prayer was one of the things that should be included in there. So that covers the beginning of your worship team gatherings, but I also believe that we should be praying at the end of our worship team gatherings. So I think we do that most of the time at worship rehearsals. I hope you do, where you're praying with your team for the coming Sunday, you're praying for prayer requests. But what about like on Sunday mornings? Do you grab your team real quick after they lead worship and huddle up and pray again and just thank God for the opportunity that you had? Those prayers at the beginning are important, but also the prayer at the end where you're just celebrating. That's a perfect time to celebrate too. Celebrate the wins that happened that day and thank God that he made them possible. So the first habit: start and end your worship team gatherings with prayer. The second habit you can build this year is to record and listen to yourself lead worship every single week. This is hands down the best way to actually improve your worship leading, because you can read all of my posts, you can watch all of the videos on this YouTube channel, but ultimately only you know what you need to work on in your worship ministry. I mean, I have a lot of ideas because I know a lot of worship leaders and I've been leading worship for a while, so I know the common sticking points, but you can also listen to yourself and identify Spencer talked about this, and I'm not doing this. I listened to myself lead worship, and I missed that. So I can work on that. So that's one way that you can improve, and that's probably the best way that you can improve, is to constantly listen to yourself over and over again. And I know that it's painful because we don't like to hear ourselves, because we're really critical of ourselves and we point out all of our flaws and mistakes. But you can only fix those flaws and mistakes if you identify them. And if you never listen to yourself, it's really hard to diagnose any problems that you have with your worship leading whenever you're in the actual act of leading worship, because you have so many other responsibilities. You're focused on the people that you're leading. And so you don't really get to have that insight of what could I do better next time. So the best way to do it is to listen to recordings of yourself. And that goes for you just as a worship leader. You should be sitting down and listening to yourself, but I think it also applies to your worship team. And maybe you don't do it every week, but maybe once a month during worship rehearsals, you just take a recording of a song that you did on Sunday and just listen to it, and let your team know at the beginning, hey, I'm going to be asking you, what did we do well and what could we do better? And if you just ask those two questions and have honest conversation around that after listening to the recording of your worship team, you're going to identify so many things that you can work on then during rehearsal. And if you just work on one thing a month, by the end of the year, you'll have 12 things that you've improved upon. So make it a habit to listen to yourself lead worship every single week so you can improve, but also listen to your worship team with them, listen to recordings of them on a regular basis. The third habit you should build this coming year is to thank your team. Make it a regular routine, a regular habit of thanking your team. In everything that you can do, in every possible way, seek to thank your team. So you can do that just by saying it after church on Sunday, after they lead. Just say, hey, thanks for leading worship today. It can be that simple. Maybe you send a thank you message along with whenever you send the set list out to your team. You say, hey team, here are the songs for the week, blah, 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 and reckless love. And then add on to that, and I just want to thank you so much for leading worship and serving the people of our church. It could be that simple. The other way that you can thank your team is actually expressing gratitude to them through your actions, by having a plan whenever you meet together, so you aren't just kind of looking around and you don't really know what you're doing. That's not really showing gratitude to your team. That's showing that you don't respect them because you haven't planned in advance. So show it through your actions as well. Start rehearsals on time, whether everybody's there or not, and end rehearsals on time. Have an ending time for your rehearsal. And all of these things show your team that you are grateful for them because you want to respect them. So tell them and show them that you are thankful for them. The fourth habit to build this year is to worship through your set list every single week. And I said that very carefully, worship through your set list every week. I know a lot of us run through our worship set lists every week because we need to learn the songs and we need to memorize the lyrics and we need to figure out musical transitions, all of that sort of stuff. And most worship leaders, they just stop there. But I want to encourage you this year to just try taking it one step further. Yes, run through, prepare properly, run through your worship set list, figure out all of the musical details. Even the speaking transitions can fall into that proper preparation time, but then run through your worship set one more time. But don't just run through it, worship through it. And what I mean by that is you've already got everything in place. You're prepared musically, you know the songs, you can play them backwards and forwards. But now you just get to worship through it, and you get to go on the journey that you're about to lead people on Sunday morning before you actually lead them. I think all too often we spend all of our time preparing and preparing and preparing and crafting this perfect thing, and we've got it out in the distance, and it's like whenever you've planned a trip for you and some friends, but you haven't actually gone on the trip yet, so you're kind of making it up on the fly. Like, we don't have to lead worship that way. We can plan the trip, go on the journey, and then show our church what that looks like on Sunday and know confidently where we're going because we've already gone there. So worship through your set list. Sit down with your guitar or your keyboard, or maybe you don't play an instrument and you just want to throw the songs on Spotify or something and sing through them, worship through them, treat it like you would on a Sunday morning, except as a personal time of worship, so that you go on the journey before you lead other people on the journey. The final habit you need to incorporate in this coming year is to embrace a regular routine of rest. I know it's hard to find time to rest, and a lot of us think, I can just do this forever. I can just keep pushing and pushing and pushing because I'm fueled by the Spirit of God. But God wants us to rest. He wants us to take a Sabbath, and if you're constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and you never take a break, you're going to burn out. So you can lead worship really hard for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, maybe, but then you're going to burn out. Or you can lead worship and realize that this is a marathon and not a sprint, and lead worship well for 35 years instead of 5 years. So what's going to have the bigger impact? Is it going to be those 5 years of pushing really hard, or is it going to be the 35 years of consistent obedience and faithfulness to leading your church in worship? And the only way you're going to reach that longevity in worship ministry is if you learn how to rest. And maybe I'll do a video on that in the future. I feel like people don't like to talk about that, but it's really the most important thing that you can do for yourself, because as worship leaders, we are workaholics, and we know that there is always another Sunday coming. Sunday's done, Monday's coming, and it's time to prepare for next Sunday. That's basically the routine that we find ourselves in as worship leaders. So how are you embracing a regular rhythm of rest this coming year? Are you taking at least a day off every week? That's a good starting point, but I really honestly believe that it's much more than that. That's like the small picture. That's the regular Sabbath, but I think we also need to take off at least 1 week, like a week from leading worship, not necessarily a whole week, but like take off 1 Sunday a quarter, because those extended times of rest are where you're truly recharged. And like those weekly Sabbaths, they're like recharging your cell phone to like 75%. I feel like I'm not usually back up to 100% after just 1 day off, but you can maintain that for a little bit, but eventually you need an extended time where you get back up to 100%. So do you have those planned throughout the year? What if you committed to just taking 1 Sunday off every quarter? So that'd be like 4 Sundays this year. Maybe that sounds impossible to you, but I'm believing that if you plan for it, you can make it happen. And if you do that, I think that's the most important habit that you can build this year, is to find out how you're going to rest. So those are really the top 5 habits that I think that you need to incorporate into your worship leading as you step into this new year and continue on in this journey of leading worship in 2020. There's one more thing though that I put together that I want to help you with in this coming year, and that is a free worksheet that I put together called 5 questions that you need to answer to crush your 2020 worship leading goals. This is a worksheet that leads you through the process of, number 1, celebrating what happened this past year, but ultimately setting goals for this coming year. And maybe some of these habits that I just mentioned become your goals in 2020. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, my name's Spencer Cormany from leadingworshipwell.com, and until the next video, keep leading worship well.